Why would a pregnant widow risk her life to climb a frozen mountain and sneak into a stranger's bed in the middle of a storm? The truth began 3 days before, when Jessica Reyes' world fell apart like a house made of cards. The first snow of October fell over the small frontier town of Cedar Falls. Jessica was hanging laundry behind the little cabin she had shared with her late husband, James. Her hands were cold, and moving was difficult because she was 7 months pregnant. Her belly was round and firm, a constant reminder of the life growing inside her and the husband she no longer had. James had been gone for 2 months. A logging accident had taken his life and shattered every dream they had built. Their savings were gone, spent on doctors and a funeral. At first, the town wives had brought food and said kind words. But kindness ran out when winter came close and everyone feared hunger. The final blow came the day before. Mrs. Henderson from the Mercantile stood on Jessica's small porch, her arms crossed and voice sharp. "The rent is 3 months late," she said. "We need this cabin for a family who can pay. You must be out by the end of the week." Jessica had nowhere to go. In a town like Cedar Falls, a woman without a husband was treated like a burden. Her family was far back east, too far to reach before the baby came. Her friends had no space to take her in. Winter was coming fast, and every family feared they might not have enough even for themselves. She folded the last of James' shirts that afternoon. It still smelled faintly like him. Snowflakes fell, heavy and wet, promising a storm. She pressed the shirt to her face and the baby kicked, as if feeling her heart break. Tears slid down her cheeks. By nightfall, the fire in her cabin barely warmed her. She had almost no food left, only a little soup and bread. She wrapped her shawl around herself and sat close to the fire, trying not to cry. She was cold, hungry, and alone. The baby moved inside her belly, restless and uncomfortable. Stories began to swirl in her mind. Stories she had heard about a man living high in the mountains. A mountain man named Timothy Campbell. People said he was dangerous and silent. Some believed he was a former soldier broken by war. Others whispered he was hiding from the law. Children crossed the street when he came to town. Men kept their distance. But women, in quiet whispers, told different stories. Travelers rescued in storms. Firewood left quietly by doors when families had none. Kindness done in secret by a man who didn't want thanks. The wind shook her cabin walls. Snow piled high outside. Jessica knew she could not survive alone. She had nobody left to help her. She placed a hand on her belly. If she stayed, her baby would not live. If she left, she might die on the mountain. But at least her child would have a chance. So she chose to walk. Jessica packed what little she owned in a small bag. She put on every piece of clothing she had and stepped out into the storm. The snow was up to her knees. The wind cut through her like knives. She pushed forward anyway. She walked for hours, her boots thin and cold, her toes numb. The baby kept kicking, as if urging her to keep moving. She searched for a rock formation shaped like a sleeping bear, the only clue to the cabin's location. Snow blinded her. She slipped, fell, rested against trees, and forced herself up again. Her breath came in painful gasps. Fear filled her heart, but she kept walking. Her legs shook. She nearly gave up. And then, through the trees, she saw a warm yellow light. A cabin. Smoke rose from the chimney. She moved faster, stumbling through the snow toward the only hope she had left. The cabin was larger than she expected, solid and well built. She climbed the steps, shaking with cold and fear. She knocked. No answer. She knocked again. Still nothing. The wind froze her skin, and her baby moved wildly inside her. She grabbed the doorknob. It turned. Warm air hit her like a blanket. She stepped inside. The cabin was nothing like she imagined. It was tidy, warm, and cared for. A big stone fireplace filled the room with heat. A pot of stew hung over the fire. She stepped closer for warmth, her fingers burning as they thawed. It hurt, but it was a welcome pain. That's when she heard footsteps outside. A door opened. Snow blew in. A man stepped inside carrying wood. Tall, broad-shouldered, strong. His coat dripped melted snow. His dark eyes landed on her instantly. Timothy Campbell. Jessica froze, fear gripping her chest. She held her belly protectively. Timothy set the wood down. He closed the door. He studied her, taking in her pale face, swollen belly, and shaking hands. He didn't reach for a weapon. He didn't yell. He simply said, in a rough, unused voice, "You are cold." He brought blankets, wrapped them around her, and placed food beside her. Jessica ate as if she hadn't eaten in days. Warmth returned slowly. Her baby settled. Timothy listened as she explained she had nowhere else to go, no family, and a baby coming soon. He looked out the window at the raging storm. "You cannot leave tonight," he said. "Maybe not for days. You will stay until it passes." For the first time since her husband died, Jessica felt a spark of safety, but the storm would grow worse. And soon, they would face a night so cold that only one impossible choice could keep them alive. The storm grew stronger through the night. Wind slammed against the cabin walls, and the fire burned low. Jessica woke to a sharp chill in the air. Her breath showed in small white clouds. Timothy was kneeling by the fireplace, trying to save the fire. The wood hissed with smoke. It was wet from the storm. "It will not burn well," he said, his voice low. The wood was in snow too long. The flames were weak and fading. The cabin's warmth was disappearing fast. Jessica shivered and pulled the blankets closer. The baby kicked hard, reacting to the sudden cold. Timothy opened the door for a moment to release the smoke, but freezing air rushed in, making Jessica gasp. Snow had piled so high outside it nearly reached the window. If the fire died, the cold could kill them both. Jessica watched as Timothy worked with urgency, adding bark and moss to the fire. It smoked heavily, but didn't grow strong enough to heat the cabin. Jessica knew the danger. A pregnant woman and an unborn child could not handle freezing temperatures for long. Timothy stood still for a moment, thinking. His jaw tightened. His voice was calm but serious. "There is only one way to survive this cold," he said. "We must share body heat." Jessica's heart pounded. She knew what he meant. She had heard of such things. Travelers trapped in storms, staying alive by sharing warmth. It was not about romance. It was survival. "I will not harm you," Timothy said, keeping his eyes away. "I will not touch you more than needed. But if we do not share warmth, you and the baby may not live through the night." Jessica looked at the weak fire, at the frost forming on the window, at her shaking hands. Her baby moved restlessly, almost as if pleading. She swallowed her fear and nodded. "Yes," she whispered, "I understand." Timothy moved with care. He gathered blankets and quilts, layering them thickly on the narrow bed built into the wall near the fireplace. He worked quietly, with discipline, but Jessica sensed how tense he was. He was a man who valued distance. Yet tonight he was forced into closeness he hadn't allowed in years. "You will sleep against the wall," he said. "It will keep you warmest. I will stay on the outside, nearest the cold." Jessica climbed into the bed, her heart racing. She lay on her side, facing the wall, her belly heavy and tight. Timothy lay behind her, but kept space at first, careful not to crowd her. Then, slowly, he moved closer, until his warmth reached her through the layers. The change was immediate. Heat spread through her, soothing the shaking and easing the baby's kicking. She felt Timothy's breathing, steady and calm. He kept his hands to himself, rigid with restraint. But her body, exhausted and frozen, leaned toward the warmth on instinct. Without meaning to, she relaxed into him. They lay in silence, listening to the angry storm outside. Snow and wind beat the cabin, but inside there was a small, shared island of warmth. "The baby is strong," Timothy said quietly, when he felt a firm kick through the blankets. "He moves a lot," Jessica answered softly. "James used to say the baby would be strong." There was a long pause. "How long since he passed?" Timothy asked. 2 months, she said. Her voice shook. He was helping another man during logging. A tree fell wrong. He saved the other worker, but he didn't save himself. Timothy was silent, but she felt the pain in his breathing. She sensed he knew loss too, deep loss. "He would have been a good father," Jessica whispered. "He was gentle, patient. He talked to the baby every night." Timothy's voice was low. "A good man is not forgotten." Something in those words eased a piece of her heart that had been locked in grief. The storm raged all night. But wrapped in shared warmth, Jessica felt a peace she had not felt in months. She drifted into sleep and dreamed of James, not in sadness, but smiling, placing her hand over her belly as if blessing their child. When she woke before dawn, she found she had turned in her sleep. She was pressed fully against Timothy's chest. His arm rested around her, protective, not claiming. She felt his heartbeat through his shirt. For a moment, she didn't move. It felt safe. Right. Human. Warm in a way she'd forgotten existed. Timothy slowly pulled back as he realized their closeness, giving her space. But he did not act ashamed or harsh. He simply rose and rebuilt the fire with quiet care. By midday, the storm began to ease. Snow settled thick and white across the mountains. Timothy watched the fading wind through the window. "You will be able to travel by afternoon," he said. The words hit Jessica like a knife. Travel, leave, go back to the world that had already thrown her away. She looked around the cabin, the warmth, the safety, the first kindness she had received in months. Her heart squeezed with fear. Where would she go? Who would help her give birth? Who would protect her baby? Timothy placed her breakfast on the table. When she took the bowl, her fingers brushed his hand. She looked up, and in his eyes she saw something she hadn't seen before. Not fear of company, but fear of losing it. "Timothy," she said, her voice steady, "I have something to ask." He met her eyes, silent but listening. "I have nowhere to go. No family, no home, and soon a baby to bring into this world. You live alone in these mountains. Maybe we could help each other, not as a burden, not as charity, as a partnership." His breath hitched. He looked at her as if she were something unreal, something impossible. Jessica felt her heart beat hard in her chest. "What if I stay?" she asked softly. "Not for pity, not to replace who you lost, but to build something new that helps us both survive." For a long moment, the only sound was the soft crackle of the fire. Then Timothy nodded once, slowly, as if the decision had been waiting inside him for years. Before anything more could be said, something unexpected happened that neither of them saw coming. "Wait, before we move on, what do you think about the story so far? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm really curious to know." Before Jessica could speak again, a sharp pain shot through her belly. She gasped and grabbed the edge of the table. The bowl nearly slipped from her hands. Her face tightened, and her breath came fast. Timothy was beside her in a moment, steadying her arm. "What is wrong?" he asked, his voice firm but calm. It hurts," Jessica whispered. "Not like before. Stronger. Tight." Timothy helped her sit down. The pain passed after a moment, but Jessica's eyes filled with fear. She knew what it meant. The baby was coming sooner than expected. "How far along are you?" Timothy asked. 7 months, she said. Her voice shook. "It is too early." A storm had just passed. The world outside was buried in snow, and now the baby could arrive at any moment. Traveling was no longer possible. Leaving was no longer an option. The cabin was the only place she had. Another pain came, stronger than the first. Jessica gripped Timothy's hand without thinking. He didn't pull away. He held her steady, his expression focused and firm. "You will not do this alone," he said. He prepared the cabin with calm purpose. He heated water, laid clean blankets on the bed, and placed a sharp knife in the fire to sterilize it. He moved like a man who had seen emergencies before. Jessica watched him, fighting fear, breathing through each pain. Lightning flashed in her memory. James dreaming of being a father, his hand on her belly, his smile. Now he wasn't here. She felt tears rise. Timothy knelt beside her. "Look at me," he said gently. "You are strong. Your child is strong. You are safe here." His voice grounded her. His steady presence filled the room with something she had not felt since her husband's death. Hope. Hours passed. Pain came and went in waves. Timothy stayed with her, wiping her forehead, helping her breathe, holding her hand when she thought she would break. Not once did he leave her side. Finally, a sharp, powerful pain made her cry out. "Jessica," Timothy said softly, "it is time." With one final push, a tiny cry filled the cabin. A baby's first breath, thin and small, but full of life. Timothy wrapped the newborn in a soft blanket and placed the child into Jessica's arms. "It is a boy," he said, his voice low with emotion. Jessica looked at the tiny face pressed against her chest. Tears ran down her cheeks, but this time they were filled with joy and relief. The baby's small hand curled around her finger. Warmth filled her heart. Timothy stepped back, giving her space, but his eyes stayed on them. For a moment the world seemed to freeze in a quiet kind of peace. Snow outside sparkled with weak sunlight. Inside, new life began. After a while, Jessica looked up. "Would you like to hold him?" Timothy hesitated. Fear and longing crossed his face. Slowly, he sat beside her. She placed the baby into his large hands. He held the child as if holding something precious and breakable, his thumb gently touching the baby's tiny arm. The baby looked up at him wide-eyed and softened something deep in Timothy's heart. His breath shook, and he blinked hard, as if fighting tears he had buried long ago. "He is beautiful," he whispered. "He is safe because of you," Jessica said. "We both are." Timothy looked at her, and their eyes held a silent understanding. Two broken lives had met in a storm, and something new had been born. Not just a child, but a bond neither expected. As days turned into weeks, they learned how to share the small cabin. Jessica recovered, and Timothy hunted, chopped wood, and kept them warm. She cooked, mended clothes, and filled the home with the soft sounds of lullabies and baby laughter. One evening, as the sun sank behind the snowy peaks, Jessica stood on the porch holding her son. Timothy stepped outside beside her, the cold air turning his breath white. The sky glowed pink above the mountains. "I named him Daniel," she said. "James wanted that name." "It is a good name," Timothy replied. Jessica glanced at him softly. "I am grateful you let us stay, but I do not want to stay only out of need. I want to stay because this feels like home." Timothy looked at her for a long moment. Snowflakes settled in his dark hair. His voice came slow and honest. "I thought my life ended years ago," he said. "I thought I was meant to live alone. But you and the baby, you brought something back that I thought was gone forever." Jessica felt her heart open. The baby's tiny hand reached up toward Timothy, as if choosing him. Timothy touched the child's cheek with gentle fingers. "If you want this to be your home," he said, "then stay. Both of you, not as guests, as family." Jessica felt warmth spread through her chest. She leaned her head gently against his shoulder, and he wrapped an arm around her and the baby. The mountain that had once seemed cold and unforgiving now felt like the place where their new life began. They stood together in the quiet evening, the snow around them glowing like a promise. A widow, a mountain man, and a child. 3 hearts finding peace in the most unexpected place. And for the first time in a long time, Jessica felt that the future held hope, love, and a chance to heal.